Okay, guys, happy Wednesday. What we have here on the screen is a breakdown of the rest of this week. So week 3, you'll notice Monday it says school holiday. That folder is empty. Tuesday, this is material we went over with the Wanderer. Wednesday, there'll be files. By the time you open this video, there'll be files in Wednesday. Just to clarify, on Thursday, Friday of week 2, there was an assignment of the Wife's Lament where you were comparing the closing stanzas. That is now due Friday of week 3. I extended it due to some absences and conflicts with some students, dates with students. Now, I don't want you to forget the material that's involved with the Wanderer, okay? You're going to be needing that next week. So if you have any questions about the Wanderer, let me know as soon as possible. Today, we're going to be talking about ballads. And this is an introduction, an overview of a concept that is bridging you into the second unit of the Middle Ages. So just to be clear, for today, we're still technically in Unit 1. Okay. If you've been talking to any of the face-to-face students, they've been doing slightly different assignments. So at this point, I'm catching you up to where they are as far as ballads are concerned. But again, in a few days, you're going to shift in a slightly different direction. Okay, so what we need to go over now, the file is labeled Approaches to Literature, I believe is what Approaches to Literature is the file you'll see in Wednesday, okay? So it's titled Approaches to Poetry, but this is basically discussing all of literature as a whole. I'm making an overview, a wide generalization that applies to all literature, even though it's labeled poetry. So the first thing I want to point out, there are two styles. I can say this in a general sense. There are two writing styles as far as literature is concerned. And basically, you have material that will follow a formula, or you'll have material that breaks the formula, that will look at an established, rigorous pattern and break it. On the left-hand side, usually this is labeled traditional. It's conventional. This type of work follows the formula, follows the expectations of what the culture has established in the past. Whereas there's some writers who want to be experimental, who want to establish something avant-garde that stands out and is a new approach to an old idea. These works in this category tend to be more expressionistic. That is, they let the emotion of a character or the mood of a situation be the controlling factor in the crafting of the piece. A good example, you could label The Wife's Lament as expressionistic. It is so emotionally driven about her grief, it comes across as slightly experimental. Although it is following a traditional path of the Anglo-Saxon poetry, it's not very realistic as far as the plot is involved. It's not driven by the storyline, it's driven more by the emotions. So therefore, in a manner of speaking, it's breaking the pattern of what is expected in Anglo-Saxon poetry. It's producing unexpected results. Now, another English teacher could argue the case with me about this. So that's just my opinion. Okay. Again, all literature can be broken down into this overgeneralization. To take this up another notch, I've got two paintings on the screen, both of which are worth millions. The one on the left is the Grant Wood. It's photorealistic. It's an oil painting on, I believe it's on a panel. It's, like I said, photorealistic. You look at it, you know instantly what it's about. You see a male and a female. He's holding the pitchfork. You've got their house in the background, and at the very top, there's a cross. And if you look carefully at the window pane, there's a cross in the window pane. There's a cross in these two windows. So the influences of religion are symbolically being placed in the work. Or you can say the viewer can apply this type of symbols to the work if they wanted to. Okay, it might be beyond the artist's expectations. He might just have wanted to paint a very realistic portrayal of two people. Whereas you have the painting, or it's actually a pastel on paper, of what's called The Scream. This is by Edward Munch. He wanted to paint an emotional reaction, a feeling of despair and dismay, of a figure totally isolated and alone. This is a visual example of a pariah, somebody who feels outcast from society. There's a distance between this figure and the more realistic figures on this bridge in the distance. Okay. None of the work here is produced in a terribly realistic fashion. It's almost childlike, and the strokes are very broad and thick. Okay. His goal was not to create something realistic. It was to create something expressionistic, emotional. You react to it. Positive or negative, you react to it. Okay? It's the same way with literature. Sometimes you'll get something non-traditional, it's emotional, and you're supposed to sit back and think about it for a minute. Digest and read it again. Sit back. Think about it. Then react. Okay? Otherwise, there's also some traditional works, you read through it, you understand them instantly. There's a quick and easy plot line. There is a story. You understand the moral of the message. Okay. So that's a basic concept in the arts. Now, moving forward, we'll be talking about ballads. We're also talking about what's termed Middle English. This is in the Middle Ages in English history. So, the beginnings of ballads start with the Anglo-Saxons. So a lot of what I'm referring to here will apply to, say, the year 900 all the way up to the year 1300. These devices that I'm going to refer to were very strict and very expected in all poetic writing all the way up to the 1800s. All the way up to the middle 1900s, people, when they heard the word poetry, expected it to rhyme, have a strict meter, and have an obvious flowing metaphor or simile that's controlling the message. Okay. Let me try to fix this so that is less. I guess I'm stuck with it viewing that way. Okay. So, moving forward. All poems have rhythm in them. Even modern poetry, when it's free verse and there's no meter and there's no rhyme scheme and the lines are like 2 or 3 words, there is still rhythm in the work. With free verse, the rhythm is based on the author's tones of speaking. Okay, but there is a rhythm. Now, as far as older works, they are composed with meter. They have a strict count and a strict expectation of rhyme schemes. As we move forward, we need to be sure that you are able to distinguish and label and identify the types of meter and the types of rhyme. So I'm going to start out discussing meter. The unit of measurement for meter is called a foot. So just like 12 inches equals a foot, if you have more than 1 foot, you have multiple feet. Okay. Now, this is going to become a little muddy, and then I'm going to clear it up. So just be patient. It's going to get a little complex, and then I'm going to smooth out the material. There's more than one type of meter. So, unlike with math, a ruler will always be 12 inches. In poetry, there's more than one way to measure a foot, a given foot size in the poem. It's all based off of a syllable count. So I'll show you an example in just a second. In simplest terms, since 9th grade, you've been shown, for the most part, iambic pentameter. That's what Shakespeare uses predominantly in his plays. It's 5 feet per line with an iambic beat. Okay? So, to explain this further, like I just said, meter is measured in feet. They're units of measurement that deal with stressed and unstressed syllables. So depending on the type of foot you want to use will dictate the size of the count, or the size of the actual foot. So I'm going to restrict it for the majority of English poetry. They're set up in these 4 types of feet. You have iambic, trochaic, dactylic, and anapaestic. To give you a quick overview, dactylic and anapaestic are based on 3 syllables per foot. We won't be using them for the rest of the course. I just want you to be aware they exist, okay? But they're based on 3s. Whereas iambic and trochaic are based on syllable counts of 2. And those are easily identified, and they're more recognizable, actually, when it comes down to it. The construction is more natural for the speaking voice. So, again, just to extend this a little bit, dactylic and anapaestic are based on 3. If you were studying ancient Greek poetry or Latin verse, it would be more obvious how these 3 syllables are constructed based on the nature of the language. Another example, in Arabian in Arabian poetry, the variety of meters that are involved with that language, there are, I believe it's 7 or 9 different types of meter. Okay, so that can become very complex. Again, English, the way we've constructed, we mainly talk in an iambic tone. Every other syllable gets a stress when we talk. It mimics, as some people have pointed out, it mimics the heartbeat. So it goes dun dun, dun dun, dun dun, dun, dun. And at one time, some people proposed that's why we have iambic meter. But there's an obvious flaw in that argument if you look at Arabian literature, for example. They have the same heartbeat, but they have that really complex series of meters. So as much as I find it fascinating that someone thought that up, be that as it may, it doesn't really work as an explanation. So again, iambic and trochaic are 2 beats per foot. You have 2 syllables in both cases. Now, iambic, like I said, is the way we naturally talk. So if you look at the word compound, just by the nature of the way that's stressed, just the natural way that's expressed, if you look that up in a dictionary, a good dictionary will show you stress points or accents. The word compound, you'll see there's a stress on the second syllable. Likewise, with the word witchcraft, there's a stress on the first syllable, witchcraft. With trochaic, the stress is on the first syllable. With iambic, the stress is on the second syllable. I always found it interesting. We talk naturally more in iambic than we talk in trochaic. But a good example of when one would use a trochaic stress, if you're climbing up a flight of stairs, I always use the same analogy. You're walking up a flight of stairs and you trip and you stumble back and you start cursing. The instant you curse, that's going to get a stress, and then the rest of your statement is going to be forced into a trochaic rhythm or a trochaic meter. So I'll have some more examples to back this up. Okay. On the screen, I now have what's called iambic pentameter. This is attributed to Shakespeare, and the poet had a strong sense of iambic pentameter. He had a skill, a talent for developing a natural flow of language based on this meter. So when you say iambic pentameter, iambic again means the stress is on the second syllable of every pair in the line. It's composed of 5 full feet, so 5 pairings. So if you look at the numbers down here to 5, and I'll force the meter when I recite it. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Now I'm going to do it more naturally. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Okay, so every other syllable is getting the stress. I, ere, to, some, day. Okay, now you'll notice the word summer is getting split in half. When you're counting the feet, always be sure to start on the left-hand side and move to the right. I've had students try to do it the other way around. If you do it backwards, it'll screw everything up. Okay? Start left to right, like you're naturally reading. So you count 1 syllable, 2 syllables, put a slash mark. 1 syllable, 2 syllables, put a slash mark, so forth and so on. So when you're doing this, the word summer, the manner in which it's placed in this line, it gets split in half. So the first syllable sum is part of foot 4. The syllable mer is in 5. You might also notice right away that the word summer by itself, taken out of the line, the word summer is naturally trochaic. but because of its placement in the line, it is becoming iambic. So with the addition of this word a, it shifts the emphasis over. So that's how the line is maintaining an iambic sense of meter. Okay. Again, if you have a question, let me know. This is an example of trochaic meter. This is by Emily Dickinson. So I'm only going to focus mainly on the first two lines. Emily Dickinson loved trochaic. She loved the way it's unusual, it's unexpected, it's experimental. She liked to twist the notion of what is labeled and defined as poetry. Ironically, she's become like the spokesperson for poetry. So, in the 1800s, if you said you were writing poetry, they were expecting iambic, they were expecting pentameter, and they were expecting an easily identifiable rhyme scheme. Emily Dickinson didn't do any of that. She's playing with the conventions. If you just look at the opening line, she's using that word, witchcraft, which is trochaic. So it goes, witchcraft was hung in his Tory, but his Tory and I find all the witchcraft that we need around us every day. Okay, so looking at the first two lines, again, the stress is on the first syllable within the pairing. Witchcraft was hung in his Tory. Okay. Now, going by this example up here, these lines are labeled trochaic tetrameter and trochaic trimeter. This line here is trochaic tetrameter. This one is trochaic trimeter. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4. And then the second one, 1, 2, 3. Sorry, I didn't mean to move forward later. Okay, so when you're looking at labeling the meter, if you have 1 foot per line, that's monometer. If you have 2 feet per line, that's dimeter. If you have 3 feet per line, that's trimeter. 4 feet, tetrameter. 5 feet, pentameter. 6 feet, hexameter. I'm going to limit it to these 6. But these are the terms you need to be sure you understand, because I'll be using these terms in the future videos. I will say the poem we're about to read is iambic hexameter. Or I'll say the main influence of this poem is a trochaic dimeter. So you need to remember what all these terms mean. When you get an exercise shortly, either Friday or Monday, you'll have to be sure you understand what these terms and how they operate. Okay, so I have up here an example of iambic monometer. Each line is only 1 foot. Now this was composed by Robert Herrick. He's experimenting, he's playing with the notions. If you read this really quickly, you'll notice the end words are rhyming in sets of 3, not the expected sets of 2. So, thus I pass by and die. I, by, and die. So that's the formula for the rest of the poem. And it is 1 foot per line. 2 syllables equal 1 foot. and it's iambic. So the second syllable is getting the stress. Thus, I pass by and die. It goes on. As one unknown and gone, I'm made a shade and laid in the grave. There have my cave, where till I dwell. Farewell. So Herrick is doing an experiment. That's why it's a little awkward, let's say. I like the poem, but it's different. One other reason I like to point this poem out is this line right here. Notice the two apostrophes. I pronounced the line in full without the apostrophes because I wanted you to be certain you understood what was being stated. So officially, I should have said if grave because it's missing the N and the E. He took them out so that when you say it naturally, in the grave, that's 3 syllables. 3 syllables do not make 1 foot. Okay, so he took out those, so you blur it together, if grave, and therefore now you have 2 syllable count. And that's how it meets the monometer expectations. It's a perfect monometer. All the way up to the 1800s, poets, if they wanted to have a strong mathematical, musical control over the verse, they often would take out letters and pop in apostrophes. It's very rare these days that poets actually do that. Okay. But whenever you see the apostrophe, that's what's happening. They want you to look at the count and recite it so that the meter is more perfect. And again, that's monometer. This is an example of dimeter. And personally, I don't like the poem at all. It's too sing-songy. It's too broken up, for lack of a better word. If you look at the first stanza, I'm emphasizing the syllable count so you see how it is dimeter. So this is 1 foot, this is 1 foot. 1 foot, 1 foot, 1 foot. And I'm only going to recite the opening stanza, so watch how it operates. When up aloft, I fly and fly, I see in pools the shining sky, and a happy bird am I. Notice the title is The Robin. Okay. So again, I don't like this poem at all. The closing is even rather gothically morbid to me. Now, it is labeled iambic dimeter. It is iambic throughout the whole verse, but you might pick up on the fact that on the 1, 2, 3, 4, the 5th line, it has an extra half foot. I can't justify why Hardy did this. So I marked out the 4 lines that do not follow an iambic dimeter. My main point here, even though these flaws are in the count, it's still labeled iambic dimeter. Because overall, the average of lines is strongly iambic dimeter. So again, even on these 3 lines, there are other ways of expressing the same point and getting the same music without messing up the count like he has with these. And it's odd, the positions of these lines. And there's no mistake in this stanza here, in the second stanza. So it's almost as if he drafted it once or twice and said, I'm finished with it, without going back and double checking the meter. So this poem irritates me. Be that as it may. That's iambic dimeter. Okay. Now, the other set of terms that I need you to be sure you understand. We will be dealing with sonnets in a few weeks. Okay, we will move into the Renaissance period, and at that point we'll be discussing English sonnets. In order to explain the English sonnet, you have to understand the construction. In order to understand the construction, you need to make sure you know the terms. There's a difference between an Italian sonnet and an English sonnet. The first main difference, Italian sonnets are based on tercets. English sonnets are based on quatrains. Okay, so, and that's the language I'll be using. I won't say 3-line stanzas. I won't say 4-line stanzas. I'll say quatrains, tercets, couplet, so forth and so on. Of this list, I really don't like the term for 5 lines, which is cinquain. It just doesn't flow off my tongue in an easy manner. So that's the one I might say 5 lines. It depends on my mood. So other than that, 2 lines, couplet, 3 lines, tercet, 4 lines, quatrain, 5 lines, cinquain, 6 lines, sestet, 7 lines, septet, 8 lines, octave. And these are the types of stanzas. So when you see a group of a verse with only 2 lines, that's a couplet. If you see a 6-line stanza, that's a sestet. And I'll be using that terminology from now on. Even with the ballads, okay, the majority of them are set up with quatrains. There are a few that will use cinquains or sestets. Okay? Okay, so that's poetic devices. I'm going to close at this point. I've probably been talking for over half an hour. So tomorrow I'll post another video relating to ballads, an overview of the whole topic. So be safe out there, and I'll talk to you all later.